Hello, New Zealand. Happy New Year. I'm Bob McCoskrie. Welcome back to Straight Talk. This is our fourth year. This is episode number 106, and it's election year. Yep, general election in November. So that is very exciting. A very exciting year. Today we're going to ask the panelists about, actually, you might think that I look a little different. Like, do I look more at standing or sitting or something? I'm actually in the backup studio because not only did the staff have a bit of a holiday, but the computer did as well. We came back, the computer didn't. So backup studio. So that's why it looks a little bit different. Anyway, tonight we're discussing Waitangi Day and what does it mean or not mean to the panelists. We're also going to talk a little bit about politics, a new poll out today, and should Rawiri link up with Winston? Is Winston interested in Chris? Is Luxon interested in Te Pāti Māori? Is Chloe worried about Hipkins and all that stuff? So we'll find out a little bit of commentary about that in Waitangi Day politics shenanigans as well. Social media, a new poll out over the break, which suggests that there's widespread support for a social media ban for under 16s. But can the fears be allayed about government intervention, blocking of free speech and overreach by the government, basically digital ID? We'll also look at immigration. When is immigration okay or not okay? And when should you protest about it? And should you be allowed to march over a harbour bridge to protest? You know what I'm getting at. And if we have time, what else? Offensive language. A new poll out talking about, is offensive language still offensive? You might be surprised by the result. Anyway, sorry, just an apology about the comments coming through. I will see them and I'll be able to read some of them, but I won't be able to put them up on screen just due to the computer being on holiday. Anyway, people who are not on holiday is our panel, and it's a big welcome to them all. Firstly, to Sue Reid in Masterton. Happy New Year. How are you, Sue?
I'm very well, refreshed from a great holiday, ready to become a grandparent.
Oh, when is that?
End of May.
Oh, very exciting. Very exciting. Mark that in the diary. To illustrious author and commentator Ashley Church. Ashley, you've just published a book.
Oh, well, I haven't done it yet. It's a few weeks away yet.
Okay. Have you got it to show us?
No, nothing. But listen, I do have a complaint. Because I've been watching your salubrious promotion of this show over the last few weeks, and I've got two complaints in relation to it. Firstly, I think that the Beatles have probably got a copyright case against you for ripping off Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band in the cover that you use promotion. And secondly, and probably
more importantly,
secondly, and more importantly, right up the back, almost as an afterthought, that you just sort of thought about at the end, is me and Arte.
Yeah.
It's almost not noticed. We just sort of perched at the back as if somebody said, oh, you've forgotten Ashley and Arte, you better throw them in.
Well, here was the problem, Ashley. We couldn't actually fit your head in originally.
Fair enough. Enough.
So anyway, let's go to the perfume capital of New Zealand, Wellington. Arte, how's the smell there?
It's really hot here. It's hot as Tonga, malolele.
Yeah, that is saying something. Speaking of bad smells, Simon, evening.
Well, I think I've actually got a stronger case than Ashley around the advertising. I'm on the far left. Yes. I mean, I'm just not used to that. I mean, any further, I'd be progressive and woke. But look, great to be back. And look, I'm so pleased, Bob, you're talking about holidays, because, I think I speak on behalf of all the staff. We'd love to carry on our holidays. Just putting it out there.
No, not giving you a holiday. All right, let's get straight into it. Look, Waitangi Day over the weekend. We had a long weekend, but did it mean anything? Sue, kick us off. Does Waitangi Day still hold special meaning for you, or is it just a 3-day weekend?
Well, I'm probably the odd one out because being Australian, I celebrate Australia Day more. We had the Australian flags up and the cupcakes and everything red, white and blue, or green and gold. So I'm probably not the best to ask. However, I am married to Brent, who is Māori, and I did ask him, and I said, what does it mean to you? And he said, absolutely nothing. He said, apart from the historical reference, he said, absolutely nothing. And I thought back, as a family, have we celebrated? Have we done significant things for Waitangi Day? And the answer was probably no. It was a day at the beach, some diving in the past, but we have been to the Waitangi grounds And we, of course, we know our history. It is a significant historical day, but we've lost the meaning for that. And I think people are fed up with just the fighting. I would note that TV1 called it a commemoration rather than a celebration. I'm always looking at language. So why is that a commemoration? We refer to Anzac Day as a commemoration. So Waitangi Day means different things to me, for me and for my family, but we always look at we always have to acknowledge history.
Okay, Ate, I'm fascinated to ask you this one. As a true blood Tongan, married to a Pākehā, what's Waitangi weekend and Waitangi Day mean for you?
Holiday. We really enjoyed the long weekend. But having said that, I think there's too much time given to politicians, and they just use it as a voting thing, which is disgusting. There had been a treaty, and all of people want to honor the treaty that was made. It has just become politicized, but I'm just so disgusted that politicians have given too much airtime on it, and they're just using it. Tongans are not many people in Tonga, but when it comes to Matema Tongan rugby, we're all, no matter what our differences, we all come together as one people. So I think it just said that Treaty Waitangi has brought division, whereas Kiwis, we need to all to come together as a collective. But that's my thoughts.
Okay, Ashley?
Well, in a perfect world, it would be a celebration in the same way that Australia Day is. It would be a day of, celebrating the fact that we are a nation and the things that have brought us together and the things that unify us rather than divide us. But Ate's right, that's not going to happen. And in fact, this isn't new. You can go back to the 70s at least and earlier. This has been used as a political football. In fact, I think Muldoon had a crack at renaming it New Zealand Day during his term of government, and that didn't go down at all well. So it was put back. Look, I think there's a pretty strong case for our new day, which is a celebration day more in line with what the Australians do. And I had a quick look at this, and there's basically three potential prospects. The first one would be Dominion Day, which is the 26th of September, originally in 1907, and that was the year that New Zealand basically was made an independent self-governing state, separate from the UK. The second one would be Constitution Day, a little bit earlier. That's the 30th of June, 1852, or the 17th of January, 1853, which was either the day that the Constitution Act was signed or the day that it was enacted, and that was the one that gave New Zealand representative government. And the third one, and this one's actually got some legs, is Suffrage Day, primarily because New Zealand was the first country in the world to have women's suffrage, and that was the 19th of September, 1893, which is something I think we don't play up enough. The problem with that one, of course, is that it would probably be turned into a political ideological debate around transgender and a whole range of other things, and would have exactly the opposite effect. The two others that get mentioned, one's Anzac Day, and as Sue quite correctly indicated, Anzac Day is actually a commemoration. It's not a celebration, and I can't see any circumstances, although it did define us as a nation, it wouldn't be appropriate to celebrate on that day. It's the reason the Australians don't. And Matariki would end up basically just being another version of Waitangi Day. So of those that I just gave you, Bob, my choice would probably be Dominion Day in 1907 as a great day. Whether that'll happen or not, who knows? But there is a strong case.
Okay, it won't happen. I can guarantee that. But it was a great theory. Simon, Waitangi weekend, hold special meaning or not?
No, not for me. Not in itself. I mean, I think, what happened at Waitangi on the 6th of February, 1840 was significant. I think actually it's really important that we understand the dynamics and we lean into, some of the difficult and uncomfortable conversations. But Waitangi Day itself here in New Zealand has become captured, and I would argue disconnected from what it's meant to be about. And I'm just looking at the symbolism that was, to be fair, curated through media, so I might have it wrong, but Waitangi itself was just festooned only with Maori sovereignty flags. There was no New Zealand flags on the bridge and so forth, obviously on the flagpole. The Prime Minister, Chris Luxon, sought to speak a little bit in Māori, and he was mocked and attacked for that. And I suppose the irony and the disconnect for me, Bob, is we talk about a treaty, people talk about partnership, I want to put that in inverted commas, coming together, and yet the message of Waitangi Day through the activists and through mainstream media is all one of monological discourse. It's all about one side. There's no treaty. And I suppose that's something I see in the wider discussion here in New Zealand. It really isn't about bringing people together. It's about separating. And I think the majority of New Zealanders really just, well, to be blunt about it, don't give a tinker's cuss. It's a long weekend, but that disconnect between what, if you will, the elites think Waitangi Day is and what the people do are very separate. But can I just finish by putting up a fourth alternative to Ashley is 1947. Never accuse me of being too conservative. But 1947, when New Zealand passed the Westminster Statutes, becoming totally and formally separate from the United Kingdom. But anyway, that's just by the by, because like Bob was saying, it'll never happen.
Well, I got distracted because I was just Googling Tinker's Cuss. And
have you never heard that
you're
before?
right. Yeah, something of
Come
no
on,
value.
Sue, help me out here.
That's interesting. I thought you were just trying to avoid swearing because we're talking about foul language later on in the program. And so you were just using another term. Okay, look, that does segue. And I'm going to have to ask Gordon to put in some of these visuals as we go along. Number 22. So at Waitangi, obviously, we had the standoff, and it was happening between Rauri Waititi, the co-leaders of the Te Pāti Māori, his wife. And so she goes across and she challenges Eru Kapakingi, who is the son of Miriama Kapakingi, who was suspended by Te Pāti Māori. In terms of Waitangi being a place of unity, Ashley, it just didn't seem like that, did it? There seemed to be a lot of infighting, and usually Waitangi is where they come together, but in fact they were splitting apart, which was interesting to watch.
Yeah, I mean, look, you've got to give Te Pāti Māori full marks for entertainment value, because they never fail to disappoint in that regard. But yeah, the division's strong. It's interesting when you look at that, and I know we're talking a little bit later about the potential for coalition building after the next election. Te Pāti Māori seem to be doing everything that they can to ensure that they're not part of that equation. And this current rift will be, yesterday's news in a month's time, but there will be something else. There will be some other scandal or something that happens within the party. It's interesting because I really expected, because it was 2026 election year, I really expected this to be the year that the full forces of Māoridom came down hard on the National Party and on the coalition government. And it wasn't that way at all. It was a pretty tame affair for them, and it was all internecine warfare between the various different factions of Te Pāti Māori itself. So, I bought some popcorn, sat down and watched. It was fantastic.
Okay, image number 8. Sue, does it seem like there is a marriage made in heaven between Labour and Greens?
That was interesting, wasn't it? Positioning, theatrics, quite an odd, let's do something to look like we're coming together, but very an arranged marriage, I would probably refer to it, call it. Lots of strained, I think probably, if I'm honest, Chris Hipkins looks like he has been put there to do that, to satisfy the Māori caucus, because it was at Waitangi, to satisfy his Labour Māori caucus. So that was just looking very politically staged and very false. And I think probably in this election year, if they can learn anything, don't treat your voters as naive and lacking IQ. Just be honest and upfront. It was very staged, orchestrated, and very awkward.
Okay, image number 9 shows the whole opposition, but the interesting thing was that they weren't united. It wasn't a united left. Ate, it seems like that the left are fighting each other rather than fighting the far right, as they're supposed to be doing in an election year.
I think they can't help themselves. It's getting more and more silly, and it's such a waste of the taxpayers' money and a waste of media time.
Yeah. Simon, just in terms of that announcement by Penny Henare, senior Labour MP, Cabinet Minister for many years, to blindside his leader by announcing he's retiring without telling the leader, I mean, that was a major problem both for Hipkins and just kind of the look of unity within the Labour Party, wasn't it?
Oh, totally. Look, there's been rumours for a little while that Penny has not been happy. He's felt mistreated, particularly through how everything's happened around his selection and reselection around the Mararewa marae and so forth. Look, it's messy, it's untidy. There's real tensions between him and Willie Jackson. Pene is probably one of the more moderate within the Māori caucus within Labour. The fact that it was so untidily done, I think you're well articulated. It shows the tensions. If he really respected Chris Hipkins and the Labour Party leadership, he would have made this a lot tidier. I can't help think there's a mixture of just downright anger around the way he's been treated and said, I've just had enough. But I wonder too, he's not being dishonest when he says that he's tired. Political life is exhausting. But I'm just trying to think how I want to say this here. I don't think it's over for Penny. I think he may come back in a different form, under a different banner, is my own view on that and a few others. So just sort of watch that space with him. And can I just make a really quick comment about Labour and the Greens being seen together at Waitangi? It is an odd coupling, but I actually think it's a smart political move. Labour and the Greens know that they're going to be hammered in this election by National and others of being this disorganised group of people, that how on earth can they work together? So they're damned if they do and they're damned if they don't. And really the only practical way forward for them is to try and show that they can stand together, because even if they didn't do those stand-up bobs, they'd still be attacked. So you might as well lean into it, as Marama, Chloe and Chris have done, in trying to show that they can actually work together. I mean, it's one of the only ways forward, but it won't be enough without Te Pāti Māori.
Okay, it didn't look really very united. Anyway, look, let's have a look at some of the polls just over the last couple of months. So firstly, image number 4, the One News poll, which basically showed that National was slightly ahead of Labour, ACT New Zealand First. The Greens had a big drop. So that was the first one. And then in January, when we're all on holiday, number 3 was the post poll, the Freshwater one. That showed Labour ahead and National behind New Zealand First and Greens. So New Zealand First is certainly outstripping ACT, which is an interesting little trend on the right. And then today, image number 2. Now, this is slightly old because we just got the latest one out this afternoon before we had time to load it up. And I did circle there down the bottom that New Zealand First had a big rise and Greens had a drop. That's actually come back together a little bit in the latest poll. And basically, it's 60 seats each. This is a knife edge. This is take the camera across the finish line as we race. Now, just before I get you to comment on those polls, I just want to refer you to the latest poll out of Australia, which is number 5. And what it's showing is that One Nation is basically the same as a coalition, although in the latest poll this morning, One Nation was on about 28. So think of One Nation as Winston Peters, New Zealand First, and think of the coalition as, well, National, to be simple. And basically, One Nation is outstripping the coalition by about 5 points in the latest poll out this morning. So, Ashley, I just got to ask you this one. How closely should we be watching Winston Peters?
Oh, we should be watching Winston very closely. Interestingly, because there's been a lot of debate over the last year or two about the fact that regardless of how they looked in the polls, that the left bloc was unelectable because they couldn't work together and because they were such a shambles. But as things are emerging, there's actually a bigger phenomenon at play, and that phenomenon is that there is no government without Winston Peters. So either it's a government to the left or a government to the right, but regardless of what happens, there is no government that can be formed on current polling, and indeed the last 2 years of polling, without Winston Peters somewhere in the fray on that. So Peters has become extraordinarily important and has become, and he'll love this, kingmaker. And it's interesting because you'll be aware, Bob, because you've teased me about it, you'll be aware that I actually did a post about this, which got a couple of 100,000 views a few weeks back, which was basically saying that I'm almost certainly going to switch my vote to New Zealand First and to Winston Peters. I know. And that's in spite of the terrible, terrible things that I've said over the last couple of years. But I'll tell you why I say that. Because it's not so much about Winston, it's more about the National Party, and it's about the National Party in respect of this is the party that I spent most of my life supporting. I stood for them as a candidate. I was involved at an executive level over multiple years. I believed in, my blood was blue. I believed in the values that they extolled. And it's really over the last couple of years that I've realized that I haven't really changed that much. What's changed is National. National is no longer, and I know Simon agrees with this and he'll probably talk about it, National is no longer the party that they were even 20 years ago. And so it's not a case of National betraying the electorate in this term. And there'll be a lot of people who would argue that they have. It's that they never bought into those values in the first place. So the people that have looked at National as the savior of the economy and the savior, but more importantly, the savior of the social graces of the country, I think we're misguided in that. And I think there's a slow but building crescendo now of people saying, actually, New Zealand First epitomises those values much more than National does. And if you're voting for those values, you would no longer vote for National. You would vote for New Zealand First because that's the party that's likely to do the things that you expect of a right-wing party.
Okay, Ate, it seems like a shambles on the left between those three parties, and yet it's 60-60 seats. The country is split down the middle, if you believe the polls, which seems pretty incredible, doesn't it? When people obviously have forgotten what was happening 3 years ago and why we changed the government in the first place.
I can't understand why Conservative voters would vote for Labour and vote for Green or ACT on that matter, because their values are just so contrary to what we believe. But ACT, of course, David Sim would just want to continue killing people for euthanasia, as Ashley have said about the leadership and the caucus of National. They seem to have forgotten what true Conservative is. I just think maybe a lot of the Conservatives have given up and have not voted. And I just wonder, and I hope that people will have the responsibility to wake up and vote. Because otherwise, if the Conservative voters and Christians do not vote, then, and I don't understand why Christians with Conservative values would vote for Green or Labour or ACT for that matter. So I think maybe a lot of the Conservatives are not voting, and I think if there's something that we need to do is to encourage people to vote for Conservative values.
Okay. Simon, we both saw that story this afternoon that horrified us about Creative New Zealand putting $25,000 of taxpayer money towards training drag queens in Samoa. And this is New Zealand taxpayer funding. I thought that we had voted out the previous government to get rid of that woke, wasteful spending, and yet it all seems to be carrying on. Is that part of the problem? People haven't seen any change.
I think that is a big part of the problem, and it really reinforces what Ashley wrote the other week. The expectations, both of people, but also what National put out, has not been matched by reality. And it's not just in the cultural and ethical issues, it's in the financial ones. I say this just as a citizen of New Zealand. I am beyond frustrated that Nicola Willis, Chris Luxon and the crew are spending more money than Labour and Grant Robertson, are indebting us further. The economic picture is dire. And I'll be completely blunt, I am sick and tired of being told that it's all perfectly fine, that they've got it under control. They do not. I think they're out of their depth. And it's only going to get worse. And if it does, that's going to have a major impact in this election year, because what people are feeling is very detached from what they're being told. And there's a great tension there. And look, very quickly, I'm with Ashley. I think, the National Party's values have drifted a long way over a long time. And you've seen, I think, a lot of good people being pushed out and isolated. But the slight nuance I'd put in, and look, I've dealt with Winston over the years. He's mercenary. Yep, he can align with certain topics and so forth, but never forget, Winston was the one who put Jacinda in power in 2017. And please, to viewers and watchers, I'm not trying to throw stones here, I'm not trying to be overtly political, but I just don't trust Winston. Push comes to shove, he will be the kingmaker on the current trajectory, and he will do on November 8th, the day after election, whatever's best for Winston. And that's my nervousness. That's my nervousness there.
Okay, well, that's a great segue into the question that I was going to put to Sue, and it's this imagery, image number 10. Is it possible that we would see these two work together, Sue? And is that a key concern for the likes of Ashley, who really just want some backbone in a Conservative government, but you could vote for that backbone and the backbone suddenly has a lobotomy and goes to the other body?
I think Winston's learnt his lesson. He's had to claw his way back from that, and it was one of the worst decisions, and probably where I just rethought a whole lot of my politics and voting, even the way we vote. I don't think that that's going to happen. Or he said he will never go with Chris Hipkins, but if there's a leadership change, who knows? So there's always that question of trust, isn't there? I agree with Ashley. The National Party isn't what it used to be, and has really, really sliced off its Conservative, really gouged the Conservative MPs and voters. And here's a very big lesson for them to be looking. I don't think it's really been reported in the news as how big a story this is with the demise of the coalition or the Liberals in Australia under Susan Ley. She has dropped down to 15% in the latest poll today. It's dire.
Yeah.
That's equivalent of National going to 15%, just dropping. And she's not budging as a leader. So I think that there are lessons for National here in New Zealand to learn from the Liberals, and they're just starting to face the consequences and clean up some of the mess from their last election. So it's really, really dire straits over there. Pauline Hanson is very alike. You can really compare her to Winston Peters, and for some people it has been a trust journey for her too. But they're just so fed up with where Liberal has positioned themselves. For goodness sake, really from December the 14th, Susan Ley called back under urgency the politicians 2 weeks earlier than they should from their holiday. And they ended up making an absolute hash of hate speech laws that a Labor were actually able to come in, and it was such a manoeuvre of politics. So it hasn't really been reported here, but it's really dire. And I think National have got to wake up and look at what's happening across the Tasman. I would also agree with Simon, and I said it last year, and I'll back myself up again. Nicola Willis is the weakest link for National here. And we talk about who's going to be the Prime Minister, who's going to be the leader of a party. Let's start talking about who's going to be the Finance Minister. Yeah. Will Luxon have the guts, have some courage because this is going to be an election with coalition partners. So he gave Winston foreign ministry and deputy prime minister. Will he have some courage to perhaps put David Seymour, who has more economic training and economic language and nous, over Nicola Willis? So Nicola Willis can sound, that's where Simon was alluding to, she rolls out the lovely embellishment of policy or how it should look and how hard people are doing it, and it's going to come right because she has an English major. That's her training. She can use language to sell the idea. But we've seriously got to look at the economic, who will be the finance minister, because it's also going to be an election that people are going to decide on how they feel about the economy.
Yeah, no, I think she's the weakest link as well, Ashley.
Can I just add to that? So up until the last week or so, and the reason I say up until the last week or so, because I've had some confidential feedback indicating that the National Party for the first time in 2 years is starting to panic about the ascendancy of New Zealand First and what's happening to their own poll ratings. But up until a couple of weeks ago, I guarantee you, National would have thought there was nothing wrong. They wouldn't have accepted any of this criticism of their values. They would have argued that they were speaking on behalf of most of the country. They would have argued that their traditional supporters are still supporting them. And they would have been completely oblivious to the fact that 2 years into their term, they were level pegging with a government that they should of a coalition that they should have been 10 to 15 points clear of in the polls. So I think that part of the problem is that National simply do not understand how angry this country has become and how disillusioned it has become with the leadership of the National Party. And I'm not just talking Luxon, I'm talking Willis as well, and with what they've done in the space that people thought they were going to make change.
Yeah, and I actually said on another show that I was a guest as a commentator on, is that I think we're going to be watching very closely the list MPs and the candidates that National are picking in seats. For example, I'm going to be watching very closely just down the road, Papakura, which is Judith Collins' seat. And who are they going to put in there? Is it going to be someone woke, or is it going to be someone conservative? Well, not as conservative as Simon O'Connor. I mean, not that radical, but Simon, are we going to make a prediction here on Straight Talk, and are we going to say that Penny Henare is going to go to New Zealand first, just as a wild guess?
Oh, you've drawn out my attempted diplomatic. Yeah, I think actually it's quite possible.
Really?
I think it's quite possible. Partly, you don't just step away from politics without having an exit plan when you're choosing to step away. So yes, to that. Secondly, you're not going to get a Conservative in Papakura if selections and National are anything to go by.
What?
Not just currently, but over the last few years. The party, the hierarchy is just putting in quite liberal, progressive and sycophants by and large. I think that's a major problem. And to Sue's point, if I might, seeing I have the microphone until you mute me, there is not a chance that Nicola Willis is going to be removed as the finance minister. Her and Luxon are tied at the hip. And at the moment that Luxon tries to move her on, he's finished.
All right.
Sorry, Bob, but just by not reading the room and not making these decisions, this is the mistake that Australian Liberals have made. Backroom deals, your strategists, and absolutely ignoring voters. And for Luxon not even to consider it, and you got no idea how frustrated, even just hearing that from Simon, how frustrated that made me feel, that he wouldn't even consider it.
Actually, Simon, the other most experienced Minister of Finance in the government at the moment would be Winston, wouldn't it?
Yeah, he would be. To be fair, I'm not sure he's probably quite up to that. He's doing a great job in foreign affairs. Finance is a whole different game. You actually have some really good other capable people there, but they don't come with the media cachet. I'm not going to name names here tonight, but there's actually a whole lot of others in National and in the other parties who are more than capable. But it comes down to that political patronage. And Sue's right, it's what's happened to the Liberals in Australia. Their backroom deals become more important, and it's what ends up sinking them.
Okay, and on the National Facebook page, Gordon, this is number 21. This is what they put on the Facebook page for National, and this has got to be their strategy, their plan of attack on the opposition. Have a watch of this.
In the case of Labor and the Greens, there are more things that we agree on than that we disagree on.
This thing we call tax.
Capital gains tax.
Capital gains. Wealth taxes. Wealth transfer tax. The wealth tax.
Capital gains tax.
Inheritance tax. Or wealth tax. That wealth tax. But a gift tax as well.
Obviously endorse all of those messages.
That's the messaging they've got to do. They've got to take out the enemy.
That was clever. That was clever.
Yeah, very clever. All right, let's move on to our next topic, and image number 11. So I'm keen to get your feedback, team. I wrote an open letter to basically potential Christian parties for the election coming up in November. I looked at the vote for Christian parties. You'll see there that from the high of United Future, Peter Dunn, when he turned the worm in 2002, the vote has just dropped steadily. There was a little flurry with the Conservative Party. Image number 12 shows all the Christian parties that we've had over the last 8 elections. There's quite a group of them. And then image number 13 shows what they got in the last election. 5 parties all vying for the same vote. And I just think voters don't like disunity. And so I said, unless you unite, the job of getting to 5%, which is already an uphill mountain, is going to be virtually impossible unless there's some unity. So, Ate, you've read the letter. What did you think? Oh, turn your mic on, Ate.
Thank you for writing, Bob. I think you should run, Bob.
Yeah, my wife tells me to go for a run as well all the time.
Yeah, I totally agree. As far as voting, I don't understand why they don't come together, but obviously they've got their own reasons, so it's a waste of the votes. Do
you think they can unite?
I don't think so. I don't think
and
so.
Why not?
Many people have tried. I don't know. Ask Simon. I don't know why they don't unite. So sorry, but I mean, there have been many people who have tried to ask them to come together. You think that we have enough reasons as Christians to be united, but obviously not. Anyway, it's really hard for them. I mean, for those who have run, Simon and those who have run campaigns, it's very expensive. So I don't think they have a chance. So it's really sad.
Okay. So I don't think it's news to anybody, but I think you've actually run for 2 of these parties, you and your husband, Brent. Would that be correct?
Yeah, Brent stood as candidate twice for to one of the parties, and I think twice. To definitely paid campaigns from our own money. It's so frustrating. You just hit so much in your video blog, your commentary. And I just fear that it just falls on deaf ears, a bit like national strategists. And over the years, it's just one word would sum it up: huge disappointment. Well, 2 words: huge disappointment. We were badly let down by one of the leaders at the last minute, and that was where the spike came to almost 5%. Look, and we rethought our whole approach to Christian political parties after that. And I said it last year, it was very hard on these Christian parties last year in commentary, and I'll say it again, that there's too many egos, there's too many do it my way. It's a bit like church denominations. Do you expect churches in our town in Masterton, would you expect the churches to come together all as one? Okay, that's a lovely Christian sentiment, but they won't do it because they're protecting their patches and they have their own little things going on, and they barely, they do come together for Pentecost and give up one weekend a year. So, there's hope in that regard. But I compare that because that's the mindset of these parties. And I'll say something pretty hard too, that a lot of these leaders in these parties, or people in these parties, they lean into too many of them give their political aspirations a spiritual authority. And what I mean by that is they say that they've had the call of God and you must vote for this. And they're all saying that. And it's a really frustrating part of the Christian politics, Christian parties. And that's a really big disappointment. Yes, I do think that Christians have a place in Parliament. Of course they do. Like anything, we're called to different professions. Some are nurses, some are doctors, some are teachers, some are political animal, activists like what we are. But there is a place for Christians in politics. But will one party tick all the boxes for us as Christians? And no, and that is proven just have a look at our history. So Liz Truss at CPAC last year spoke about her. She was the ex-Prime Minister, very short-lived Prime Minister of the UK. And she said that she wasn't interested in joining with Farage. because to go back into politics, she realised that she would be owned. She would have to reduce her space and she would be fenced in. And that's not the pace she wants to be. She can be more effective, like Family First does, in creating that movement outside of politics, because within politics, they're owned by the human rights activists and human rights lawyers, and public servants. So she said creating a movement pushes the agenda that politicians are forced then to take up. That was, in essence, what she said. So, message for the Christian parties: you will have to unite. We can no longer, the state of our laws and where we've moved to is dire. And we can't keep doing the same thing. We can't.
Okay, and I mean, we can see within even Māoridom that there's not a unity, because, I mean, they're 18% of the population, yet Pāti Māori gets about 3 or 4% in the polls. So, Simon, I mean, do you think there is, I mean, in that graph 11, it sort of showed that at one point with Peter Dunn, it did happen. I mean, did that destroy it, or because we saw a Christian party actually in power, and it didn't deliver, so we've lost faith since then? Seems to have been a downhill slope.
I think it's been a downhill slope, but I wouldn't attribute it to those past actions. I think in many ways, United Future's ascendancy was down to the worm. It just sort of captured the moment for a variety of reasons. Look, I don't think it's impossible that a Christian party could form and get over 5%, but it would take a huge alignment of the stars. Not that I'm here to talk astrology, but analogously, you're going to have a charismatic leader, a unity that you've written about, and a message that's clear, and probably a whole lot of things happening socially which garner people's attention. If all of that comes together, there's a chance. But I thought what you wrote was completely accurate. I think what others are saying also hits the mark. Look, fundamentally, I think far too many Christian leaders see their own salvation, if I was to put a theological bent onto this, their own salvation linked to them leading their political parties. And I've seen this in a lot of the ethical debates. People who just cannot cooperate or let go of their positions, because I think deep down, consciously or otherwise, feel that this is their ticket to heaven. And to step away from it comes with, in their mind, huge consequence. And so that's a major problem. The second point, really quickly, is people don't vote according to ethical or cultural issues. People vote about the economy. And it doesn't matter if you're Christian, Muslim, Hindu, or atheist. To quote the American president of the past, it's the economy, stupid. That's where most people go. And so I think that's just fundamentally where it's going to keep going. Look, I just finished by saying this. It's the long, hard road, but the way to bring about change is to get good people. They don't even have to be Christian. They just have to hold good, if you will, conservative values into the major political parties and affect change from within. It's not as sexy, it's not as attractive as forming your own party and talking to an echo chamber of people who agree with you. It's actually the hard, long, slow road into these parties. It's how the likes of National, to tap into what Ashley was saying earlier, where National's gone. How did National lose its way? It was infiltrated by people who didn't share National Party values but were entertained, and they've slowly seen the party drift towards what they want. Soft, left, progressive, woke, whatever you want. Our challenge, and to our viewers and listeners, is to actually re-infiltrate, to use that terminology, to actually bring their Christian viewpoints into Labour, into Greens, ACT, New Zealand First, all of them, and affect change.
Okay, Ashley?
Look, I pretty much agree with a lot of what the previous speakers have said. Look, and I'm, like everybody else here, I went through a period of my life, that sort of romanticized perfect world where I would have loved the idea of a Christian party that, had 8 or 9% and acted as a kingmaker in the way that New Zealand First is now in any coalition, and kind of exerted power in that way. But that ain't going to happen. And there's a couple of extra things that haven't been mentioned I think are important to note too, and that is that in this world of biased media that basically lies, and under the sort of scrutiny, that a Christian leader in this current environment, if there was in the fate chance that a Christian party made it over the 5% mark and got into Parliament, the level of scrutiny that they would be under by the media, purely because they would be unsustainable. Nobody could sustain that level of pressure for any period of time. It would be far greater than was on anybody else. So I agree with Simon that the far smarter move, and if you look at the National Party, I don't know what its current membership is, but I'd be very surprised if its national membership was more than about 5,000 or 6,000 people. Wouldn't be hard for a few Christians banding together to basically take that party over at electorate level and actually start influencing policy again. But we don't. Instead of that, what do? We go and set up these new parties, these tiny little People's Front of Judea, Popular Front groups that have. I hope everybody gets that reference. And have no effect. The only difference I have with Simon, though, is while I agree that is absolutely the strategy in the medium to long term for this election, I disagree with Sue. I don't think it's about talking to those parties themselves. I think you've got to talk past them, because these guys are not going to talk. Their egos are too big. And I'm sorry if I'm offending any of my friends by saying that, but they just are. So the message in this election to Christians, to people who might be thinking about voting for one of those minor parties, is vote New Zealand first. And I know that's something that'll surprise you all, but if you want traditional values, it's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be all the stuff that you might get from some of these little parties, but it's about as close as you're going to get to the values that you want exerted in this country and exercised in a coalition. And beyond that, start thinking about getting involved in some of the bigger parties and actually influencing their policy. But right now, vote for a party that's going to support your values that's actually going to get into Parliament.
Okay, and that message was endorsed by author Ashley Church, and we hold no liability for any consequences of that action. I just do want to correct, it's not a lobotomy, it's a laminectomy. I thought you would have told me that, Ate. Spine removal is a laminectomy. I mean, doesn't your husband do that?
He's a witch doctor.
Oh, who, your husband?
Charming.
Oh, you mean witch doctor, is he? Oh, okay. Look, let's move on. Social media ban. Okay, so interesting poll over January as the Australian ban kicks in, and we watch with interest. Number 14, Gordon. So this is once again a poll that the Dominion Post published. What the interesting thing is that it's 2-1, basically 65% support, and then you either oppose or unsure. But look at the right-hand side there. The support is, including 18 to 34-year-olds, is the same as 55 plus. Graph number 15 shows breakdown of political parties. And you'll notice there, National, very supportive. Labor are kind of around the average. New Zealand First, ACT, consistent. Greens are less supportive, and Te Pāti Māori, least supportive. Lots of unsures or neithers in the Green Party. They can't quite make up their mind. So there seems to be, widespread support, but there's still concern about the digital ID, about the fact that it'll be used not to just target children, that it'll be used to target adults, that there'll be a speech regulator, and it sidelines parents and parental responsibility. And Free Speech Union came out with a very good kind of those 4 points and said, look, if you are going to pass it, you've got to make sure these markers are in place. Simon, those are probably pretty good markers to go on if we're going to sort of follow this impetus that is around the world, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Look, I'm just sitting here thinking I'm not surprised the Greens aren't in support. I mean, most of the Greens wouldn't know what a child is, except if it comes to transing them. So, looking after kids is not really in the Greens' interest. But
they possibly were having a joint when the survey was taken. Anyway.
Well, even that's probably not fair. A joint is singular. Probably having a few. But look, terrible jokes aside, there's a widespread support for this, including, as you've rightly pointed out, from the young ones. They themselves know the harm to themselves and to their peers. The key is to make sure that we situate this discussion in protecting young people by giving the parents in particular the tools. So we've talked here at Family First around app regulation, for example. Parents having to consent to whether the child can be accessing their digital technology or so forth. And I think we can separate that, as the Free Speech Union, alongside your strong advocacy, Bob, has said, we don't have to make this about digital ID. We don't want some sort of hate speech or social media commissioner. We can absolutely say no to those, and rightly we should, by the way. We don't want this to be a backdoor to hate speech laws like we're seeing in Australia. We don't need another commissioner, highly paid, but we can separate the two of them. In other words, we can hold both in tension. We can say we want to protect young people, we want to give tools to parents to protect the under 16-year-olds, and we reject the notion of trying to expand this into hate speech, and we reject the need for commissioners and so forth. And it does look like, actually, the government's keen to pursue this. It sounds like, if I've read the media right, we'll see an announcement in the next week or so.
Yeah, you can always tell when you're stepping on the jugular because you hear the screaming. And I mean, we've seen Meta people rush over to New Zealand trying to argue against it when for the last umpteen years they have just ignored every concern raised about what social media is doing. Ate, I see you nodding your head there. Are you strongly in support of a ban, or do you think there are concerns around digital ID and free speech, etc., government overreach?
I mean, I agree with what Simon is saying. Putting aside the digital ID, we need the parents. Parents and the government should work together. No child should have a social media account. I mean, it doesn't benefit at all. We have got the research, and they've seen the significant increase of mental health issues and all the problem with with the young people, with the children getting exposed to social media. But I mean, I think it's up to the parents, but the government needs to help. Just basic stuff, tools that, putting the phones away at nighttime, that the school should ban having phones during school hours. All that stuff is just common sense. And at the end of the day, there are some parents, unfortunately, they may be tired and the kids are just they're using it for babysitting, which is really sad. So I think it's just equipping our parents to just wake up to the problem. But the government should, there's a place for the government and tech companies to cooperate.
I'll tell you, I'm fascinated to know, because I know you go back to Tonga regularly. Is this an issue in Tonga as well?
Yeah, big problem. Big problem when they brought in the high-speed internet, 2011, and then Digicel, which is the main provider in the Pacific, they just had free phones given to the kids, and when the fiber connection from Fiji to Tonga got break, all the kids are sitting outside early in the morning outside Digicel to get connected. It's just so sad, because I mean, the huge significant rise in pornography was when they had all the high-speed internet come through. The parents had no idea, just our culture in the Pacific and in Tonga, where girls, you wear modest stuff, all of a sudden you're seeing naked stuff on your phone with the children, and the parents had no idea. So significant problem.
Yeah, and this is the bit that gets me, is that we never saw Meta rushing over here when there was cyberbullying and suicide ideation and gender ideology and pornography, but suddenly they rush over as soon as we threaten to say we're going to protect our kids. So, Ashley, I'm not sure you've been on an episode where we've actually discussed this. Where do you stand on this ban?
Well, I have a long-standing tradition with Straight Talk of always at least saying something that's going to be at odds with everyone else. And this is that issue. So I'll tell you what. So on the one hand, I absolutely agree that that social media and cell phones and all that other stuff for under 16-year-olds is incredibly harmful. And that shouldn't even be in debate. The evidence for that is overwhelming. But I do notice, no insult to anybody here or indeed anybody watching, but I do notice that as conservatives, we are very quick to say to the government, when it comes to things like sex education in schools and school lunches and everything, get out of our lives, state. Leave us alone. That's parental responsibility. You have no place in imposing state control over those things. And yet we've completely abdicated that when it comes to this issue. And we're saying, come on in, state, control our children, make decisions for us, because we've abdicated that responsibility as parents. There's a stark hypocrisy in that position, which I find interesting. So I'm not suggesting that the ban shouldn't go ahead, but I am saying that there is a little bit of a case of chasing the hares and hunting with the hounds in this when it comes to conservatives.
But I think there's a fine line on that. We're not asking for government intervention. We're asking for the government to hold big tech accountable. So we're asking
It's a
for some
subtle distinction.
accountability
It's
at
a
that
very
level.
subtle distinction, Bob. I mean,
But
I
but we can't hold big tech accountable, can we? They've exploited us already.
We can stop our kids using social media, and we can take phones off our kids. And I guess that's the
I
point.
don't know if that's realistic in this day and age. I think that's dreaming to say stop your kids using social media. Sue?
Yeah, I was actually in the camp of the cynical and anti-government digital ID from our first conversation about this. But as you explained it, Bob, I did learn something from you.
What? Did you hear that, Ashley?
What show am I on?
I learned something from you that we're going to hold the big tech accountable.
I'm just noting down the time. It's 8:56 on the 9th of February.
And by coincidence, when you were talking about this the other day on your day break, my Facebook froze, and then I couldn't get in. Something big tech happened to my computer the other day.
Oh, they were watching you.
Yeah, no, that's dodgy. But I've moved to hold big tech accountable. It was interesting. I was in Australia for actually most of the same. In fact, I had all of my summer over there because when I came back here, we had lousy weather. But it was interesting seeing the impact on families with this in place now. And I asked a couple of parents how they were coping with it, and they were all saying this is a good thing. This is a really, really good thing, that they felt supported and they felt like it had run away from them a bit. And a couple of them have 14-year-olds, and some of the things that she discovered, how they could go around it, and she really had her eyes opened. And then others, we've always had control, and they just play, this game a little bit more. So it's not affecting screen time per se, but it's affecting some of their communications and some of the sites and the apps that they're going onto. But I'll be watching. We can learn a lot from Australians, and
Really?
say that?
Oh, okay.
We'll learn a lot from. We'll watch their experience, is what I meant to say.
Yeah.
We'll watch what's going to happen in Australia at the moment and see where this is going. This is kind of like an evolving beast for me, really.
Yeah, I mean, Ashley, I don't think we want intervention, but I think in the same way that we want the government to set guidelines around minors entering contracts, when they get their license, when they can drink, when they can gamble, we're simply asking for the government, who have the ability to hold big tech to accountable, so that parents can get on with their job of protecting their
I'm not
kids.
arguing that, Bob, and I don't disagree with your point. I guess my point is we need to be very careful about our consistency of messaging if we're going to be taken seriously.
Right.
That's all.
Okay, so can you tell us how to be more consistent so we don't get called out again?
How long have you got?
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't want a government. I mean, I think we're all concerned about digital ID and having another commissioner, probably based at the Human Rights Commission, which we all want to shut down anyway. That's the last thing we want. So we'll watch this. So Simon, your people spoke to some people who spoke to some other people, and the announcement's coming soon. Is that correct?
Could be that, or I was reading the newspaper last week, and there was a reference that the government in the next fortnight is about to make some statement. Now, that said, whether it's actually something substantial or not, who knows? Yeah. Can I just say though, I don't particularly like what Australia's doing. It's the squeezing the balloon. I think they've banned 12 outlets, like X, for example, but not Blue Sky. It's just that's not the way forward. I just want to return to what, and there's a few podcasts we've done on family matters on this. There are ways, particularly through private providers, to facilitate the likes of age verification and empower parents to help. But anyway, without this sound like advertorial, I better stop there.
Okay. Ashley, you are probably the most techie of us all here, though, I think. Do you support age verification? Do you think that can work?
I think it could work. I think there are other methods, but that's a pretty easy and clear one. And interestingly, it's used in other ways for other products and other jurisdictions. So it's not as if it can't be done. I think it's more that the social media companies didn't want to do it.
Right. Okay. Look, we're just about out of time. Let's just cover this quickly. Just immigration. And the question is there such a thing as good immigration and bad immigration? There have been protests. We saw this one, number 16, where half the police force turned up to Auckland. They even had their training out at QMU, apparently, according to my little Johnny on the spots, who saw them getting ready. I mean, there were almost more cops than there were protesters. But anyway, they didn't get up on the Harbour Bridge. And look, that's a whole issue in itself, is the inconsistency and how suddenly... what was that term that I said? What was it? Artaelectomy or something. Suddenly the powers that be decided that they would stop marches on the bridge because they didn't have the spine to do it previously. So go figure. But the police have categorically said this. Number 17, Gordon.
This is a blanket ban. No more marches on Auckland Harbour Bridge ever again.
Yes, it is.
Okay. She got wiggle room there, Simon?
Yeah, she will. Look, I don't believe her for absolute second, partly because actually the bridge is not the police's jurisdiction. It's New Zealand Transport Agency, or Waka Katahi. So there's wiggle room. And look, again, what I say, I don't believe her at all. They will authorise the next progressive march across there when it suits them.
Okay. So let's just look at the immigration. And Ate, I am keen to know from you, is there such a thing as good immigration and bad immigration, or should we have open borders?
We need responsible immigration policy. That's what I support. We need people who come to build and to strengthen and to work together to build up a nation. And the immigrants should come and value and honor what the values of the nation, rather than coming and imposing what they want. We see that now in London, where Islam has taken over. And that's what we need to be aware of. In the Pacific, we see communist China coming and raping the Pacific. So that is irresponsible immigration policy. So I think Jacinda has just done a horrible job when she opened the door, used the excuse of Christchurch situation to bring in Islam, and so. Those are irresponsible policy, but I think for all of us, we support. I mean, I'm an immigrant. We want responsible immigration policy. And with regard to Brian Tamaki, of course, as we've said here, we can't have a double standard. You can't allow pro-Palestine, people going through and all the woke people, but then say no to destiny for whatever reason. We can't just flip and change with all the woke stuff of government.
Okay, so Ashley, there has been protests. Obviously, Destiny has done a couple against some Sikh parades, and so the claim is that there's too many Sikhs coming in, or too many Indians. I think I've seen on some of their imagery. Is that a message that's appropriate, do you think?
Oh, so for me, your earlier question was, is there good immigration? This isn't even a difficult question. If you go back over the last 20 years, this thing we measure called productivity, which is the rate at which Kiwis work, has been reducing steadily over that period of time. In other words, the amount of work that Kiwis do is actually reducing. It's not increasing. And yet over that same period of time, our economy's grown. We've had economic growth. The only reason for that is immigration. With we've been bringing more people in, our economy has continued to grow in spite of the fact that our productivity is reduced. So for the people who are saying we don't want immigration, that's fine. That's cool. You're entitled to that view. How do you grow your economy? What's your alternative to that? Because there hasn't been one for the last 40 years. There is no other way to grow our economy. Now,
although they're saying certain immigration.
Oh, no, that's fine. So if you're talking about who you bring in, that's a separate issue. So if you want to have that debate, that's fair enough. But then I look across the pantheon. I mean, I love Brian Tamaki. I think Brian Tamaki is the prime example of somebody putting his Christianity into action. But he is just wrong on Sikhs and Indians. I'm sorry, he's just wrong. Those are decent people. They're not upending our society. And I can make that claim of a whole range of other ethnicities. The only ethnicity, and it's not even an ethnicity, it's a religion. The only religion that Kiwi should be concerned about is the one that's causing havoc in Europe, and that's extreme Islam. So as long as we make sure that we don't make the mistakes of Europe, bring them in. I have no problem. We've got we've got skills issues that have to be remedied by bringing people in. We want our economy to grow. There are so many reasons in favour of immigration, provided we're not bringing in the rat bags that are causing problems in Europe. It's that simple.
Okay. Should we allow Australians in, Sue?
No.
It stuck with me. I reversed the trend. I think.
Okay.
I think immigration's great. Look, Brian Tamaki's message just gets lost in his broad generalisation. He just gets his message lost. So, but I would say that you must always have a strict and manageable criteria, and New Zealand should always maintain a sovereign border. That's a bottom line. Yes, we should always, because we can't do it. We can't do it on our own. We actually need foreign investment. We need skills. We need, investment into New Zealand. But I just think that, that Brian Tamaki's message is getting lost in his just in the way he generalises it. But there is a place for us, and I'm really thankful for my life in New Zealand. I get to call two nations home, but there are problems. There are problems in Australia, and it's got to, as well as the UK, it's got to be managed.
Yeah,
and you've got to always have sovereign borders.
Yeah, I mean, Simon, I guess the question is, does sort of signage saying no Indians, wear New Zealand, is that a constructive way to have this debate, or is it actually raising a valid point?
No, it's not constructive. I think it's completely unhelpful. I don't think it's based on any reality. I think it's actually just cheap scapegoating, and I think it needs to be called out. Look, New Zealand's based on immigration. Everyone in this country immigrated here at some point. And Ashley's articulated the economic point, I think, really well. And New Zealanders have to and there'll be some people here going, yeah, but the price of housing and so forth, we're being priced out of the market. Well, look, our economy would tank if we're not, or would certainly not be productive if we weren't bringing people in. But I think the key thing for people to understand is the distinction, I would argue, between multiculturalism and multi-ethnicity. New Zealand can certainly welcome a range of multi-ethnic people from all places around the world. What we don't want to struggle with, and you begin to see it in Australia, you see it very clearly in the UK and Europe, is multi-cultures. That's not working, where people come in with a whole array of different views, be they cultural, ethical, and certainly religious, that don't align, and that's causing enormous tension. And unfortunately, you are seeing this particularly with Islamic extremism. It's only one of the examples where actually people are bringing in a viewpoint which does not sit with Western liberal democracies, and it's causing major trouble. And what really ramps that up, and New Zealand isn't too affected by this, is when you flood your nation with literally millions of people who do not share your values, your history, your ethics and understandings. And it's not going to end well in the UK and Europe. You're already beginning to see that with the rise of what they call them populist leaders. You've seen it in Japan, actually. They've just re-elected someone very strong on the centre-right. You've seen a reaction coming. So, look, we could talk about this for hours, but put it this way, immigration is good, but it always must be done for what is the benefit of the nation first. And multi-ethnicity is fine. People from an array of cultures, very welcome, or ethnicities are welcome. But multiculturalism has failed. And it's not just me saying it. A lot of leaders from Liz Truss, David Cameron, if you want to go into the UK, a lot of people are saying that a nation can't stand if there's an array of various and competing and conflicting cultural values.
Okay. Excellent. Great way to wrap it up. Thank you, team. You did fantastic. First time back for the year, and it's going to be a rip-roaring year, so much so that we're going to have a different panel next year just to next week, just to show you how much we appreciated you. But anyway, thank you, Sue, Ate, Ashley, and Simon. Simon will be back tomorrow morning at 7:30 to keep the conversation going. Political playback as well on Thursday. So it is normal service resumes. And team, have you seen the latest program we got, Built on Truth, with Samuel Bilton? He's a young guy. He's like, a third of the age of Simon. So a third? Yeah. So check out Built on Truth. Anyway, that's on our website, familyfirst.nz. Anyway, thank you for watching. Been a great first night for the year. Lots to come. Have a great night. Good night.
Yeah.